Good afternoon and welcome to the regular meeting of the Public Health and Safety Committee for July 12th, 2023. I am Latricia Vita and I am the chair of this committee. At this time, I will ask the clerk to call a roll so we can verify a quorum for this meeting.
Councilmember Wansley.
Present.
Rainville.
Present.
Ellison is absent. Palmisano.
Present.
Vice Chair Payne.
Present.
Chair Vita.
Present.
There are 5 members present.
Let the record reflect that we do have a quorum. With that, the agenda for today's meeting is before us. There are 6 items on today's consent agenda. Item 1 is authorizing the submittal of a grant application to the United States Department of Agriculture Forest Service for emerald ash borer-related treatment, prevention, and replacement. Item 2 is accepting a grant from the Minnesota Department of Human Services for school-based clinic mental health services. Item 3 is accepting an assistance to firefighters grant from FEMA for wellness and fitness programs. Item 4 is the passage of a resolution appropriating funds from the Bureau of Justice Assistance to assist sworn investigators. Item 5 is approving a legislative directive requesting an overview of the Pollution Control Annual Registration Program and fees. Item 6 is authorizing additional contracts with organizations for the Partnership Engagement Fund. Is there any discussion on these items? Councilmember Rainville.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there anyone from staff that can speak to item number 1? And I don't want to speak now, but I would like to learn more off the record. Is there anybody? Could you just maybe look me up when you have a chance? Next week is fine. Great. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, I will move approval of the consent agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. That carries. The next item is a presentation on the adoption of the 2023 Climate Equity Plan. Here to present on this is Kim Havey from the Health Department. Welcome, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Committee Chair Vita. I'll just get this set up. So is that working as far as us showing? Great. Wonderful. Well, good afternoon, Chair Vita, committee members. My name's Kim Havey. I use pronouns he, him, and I'm the Director of Sustainability and Sustainability, Healthy Homes and Environment Division within the Health Department. And we're here today to review changes to the Climate Equity Plan based on public comments we've heard over the last 2 months and to pass a resolution adopting the 2023 Climate Equity Plan. I'm joined in the audience by many city staff and others from the community who have contributed to the Climate Equity Plan. I especially want to thank our staff and our consultants who have worked long hours to review the comments and to make many of the updates to the plan. I also want to thank all those who submitted comments and attended the public meetings. It really made a big difference as far as what ended up being our final plan. So today the agenda is to provide a quick reminder of our greenhouse gas emission goals, the plan's overall goals and top 10 greenhouse gas mitigation strategies, and then also I'll provide a briefing on some of the public comments we've heard and what changes that those led to in the plan. And then the overall goal today is to pass the resolution adopting the plan. So this is where we are right now. This is our most recent emissions data by activity, and you can see that fossil natural gas represents the largest share of emissions and has since 2017. And because of this growing share of our overall pie for emissions that fossil gas does take, we do quite a bit of emphasis on gas reduction and GHG mitigation from gas strategies. The 2023 Climate Equity Plan updates and replaces the 2013 Climate Action Plan. We are setting goals to accelerate and reduce our community-wide greenhouse gas emissions using the science-based fair share approach consistent with the Race to Zero pledge, which calls for Minneapolis to reduce our climate emissions by 75% from our base year 2006 emissions by 2030 and become net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 community-wide. Bloomington, St. Louis Park, Duluth, as well as other cities such as Denver and Salt Lake City are with Minneapolis and are among 1,143 local governments across the globe who have signed on to the Race to Zero pledge. We have already achieved a 30% community greenhouse gas emissions, so we need to do another 45% by 2030 to achieve this goal. At the same time, we also want to eliminate the number of households who are experiencing high energy burdens above 6% and severe energy burdens above 10%. We are also going to be establishing a not-to-exceed cumulative carbon budget, which is represented by the hash on this particular chart, that we must stay within between now and 2050. Carbon emissions are cumulative, and so this plan for the first time recognizes the impacts of cumulative emissions, which I know many people from the green zone communities have been talking about probably for decades, right? So we're looking at cumulative emissions from our greenhouse gas producing sectors. So just a quick overview of what this plan's goals are. It's really about ensuring everyone lives in a healthy and energy efficient home or apartment. It's about improving indoor and outdoor air quality. That has not been part of a climate plan before. This is the first time. Adding more green space and trees, we hear a lot about that, but really trying to take a focused effort instead of a sort of one-off effort with our green space and the use of trees, and the large amount of public space that we have that is really underutilized as green space. We want to design carbon-free transportation and complete street systems so that people can walk, ride, roll wherever and easily to other places within the city. We want to support a clean and energy-efficient water system. This was also a topic that was not included in the last plan. Develop green businesses and workforce training. This is an incredible opportunity to grow wealth within our community. Right now, we're sending billions of dollars outside the state for purchase of fossil fuels to power our electric plants and for our natural gas. We want to increase consumption of locally grown food. This is part of our food action vision, and develop a zero-waste circular economy, which is part of our zero-waste action plan. We want to green and make more efficient all of our commercial and multifamily buildings and industries, creating a carbon-free energy systems for gas and for heating and air conditioning, and also achieve for the city operations to lead by example by going net zero GHG by 2040. So the top 10 strategies to be able to do this are to complete wall and attic installations, in the 3,000 wall installations, 5,000 specifically by 2030. Ensure all households have access to ways to reduce energy burdens when they're especially above 6% or above 10% severe energy burdens. The average energy burden in Minneapolis is 2.2%. So this would be 3 times our average level for folks that are really having to pay high gas and electric bills. We want to achieve 100% renewable electricity as outlined in our renewable electricity blueprint, with 30% of it coming from local solar. Train and support 1,000 Minneapolis residents to be participating in all the weatherization and electrification and other improvements. We want to improve our air quality both outdoor and indoor through monitoring and mitigation. We've got a lot of work initially starting on that. Ensure that 3 of 5 trips are taken, as I mentioned, by people walking, biking, or riding transit. Expanding our green space, increasing tree planting, using biochar and other methods for carbon sequestration, and really developing ways to support local food production. We want to recycle and compost 80% of our waste through a circular economy by 2030, and then establish a climate legacy initiative that supports the climate equity plan's long-term implementation. So just a review of some of the comments that we've received over the last 60 days. We've got over 150 verbal and written comments that we received during that time. We received comments from a wide variety of advisory groups and organizations, as well as labor and trade unions, our utilities, MN 350, and many, many community partners. And then we also participated in having a number of listening sessions and feedback sessions that were held with council members in their particular ward. This is one of the big things that we responded to with comments asking for more detail about specifically what the GHG emission goals reductions are based off of our current system, which is based on a 2006 baseline. So this is actually additional detail that we've added in that really focuses on each of the areas that we have been tracking and will continue to track. And you can see these are, fairly dramatic numbers, but I also want to say that when we set that goal in 2013, 10 years ago, to do a 30% emission by 2020 reduction in emissions by 2025, they said that was going to be impossible, and we did it 5 years ahead of schedule in 2020, and where we are today. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to be able to still be gained and be able to really be able to invest in these carbon reduction strategies in each of these sectors. So some of the other comments that we've received about this and what we've done, really making goals more numeric in categories. We have done this and where we have the ability to do that, where we've done a little bit deeper dive in studying it, and it's actually in the two areas where we have the largest emissions, which are our building sector and our housing sector. So we did put in specific metrics and dates on where we had the additional information. We've completely restructured the plan to align our goals and strategies and actions much better, moving the strategies and actions from the appendix in the first draft to the main body document by topic in this revised draft. We've added in designations for each of the actions about whether they're a pilot, a program, a process, or a policy. We've specified who will lead on each of the different strategies, and we also included a 12-month implementation plan for this to really show what work we're going to be kicking off in the next, well, basically starting hopefully, June 21st, as soon as this is approved, or we're already working on it. But anyway, starting as soon as possible. One thing that was added was a recommendation to conduct a vulnerability analysis and resilience plan. We've done vulnerability analysis before in developing green zones, and I think it's been quite a while. 2017, I think, is when that was done. So we could really start seeing what changes maybe have happened, or for the most part, develop a baseline so we can start tracking whether we're seeing reductions in asthma, whether we're seeing increases in income, whether we're seeing some of the other impacts, temperature-wise, air quality-wise. We are ensuring recommendations from the community advisory boards are heard in there. We especially the green zones, so we really added a new section just to talk about the green zones and included reference to both of the south side and the north side green zones plan. And then also we did not mention previously the Natural Gas Innovation Act, which is about reducing greenhouse gas emissions from fossil gas. And so that was added in as a recommendation there to partner with CenterPoint on that innovative action. One of the big things that we did change after a number of different sort of technical recommendations was the goal of our energy burden, which was 4% that we had set before. Two things came up. One is that the energy burden is now being kind of shifted somewhat as we look forward into the future to also potentially be electric car fueling as well too, which can make a very big difference. So it's going to be in the future, I think, more important to understand the differences between what's true housing energy burden, what's electrification, how that works, and overall people with electrification and EVs will be paying less money, but we have to look at what they'd be paying currently in gas and what they'd be paying by utilities. So we do talk about that distinction. And then also we've ran into a couple of things with, one, our state of Minnesota and federal government, where they're considering energy burden as at 6% and severe at 10%, didn't align with our 4% goal. So what we want, and then also our data source for this GreenLink does not track below 6%. So we decided that it's best to have the better information and to really focus on those with the highest energy burdens we know. And so changing it from 4 to 6 really isn't changing who we're going to prioritize, which are those folks in the high energy burden areas. We did an online survey as well too with feedback. We had 845 individual surveys, and 79% of those respondents were white. 89% reported living in the city, and 70% were homeowners. And the reason that we did a lot of intentional outreach with this plan early on and throughout the plan design was because of this is fairly typical where we actually has a lot more renters than we probably see in many other surveys the city does. But it is definitely a white homeowner response that comes in, even though, really the city is about a little over 50% white, we get a lot more representation there. So we did partner with 10 different community-based organizations with that intentional outreach and took their input into this plan. Some of the other questions were that we heard, that we sort of analyzed what were some of the big recommendations coming out. Ensure increased dedicated and equitable funding, especially for green zones and under-resourced communities. Engaging in diverse communities and localized community spaces. and really putting the communications efforts in multiple languages, et cetera, looking for ways that we can continue to partner with these organizations that we've already been partnering in to develop the plan to now help implement. Create green and union job opportunities with intentional investments in BIPOC communities and workforce development, and address systemic harms experienced by marginalized groups are themes that came out quite a bit. One of the things I wanted to mention is that after the public hearing, we did hear from union and trade folks, and we did meet with those folks twice and have added in some of their recommendations into the plan as well, too. So in the end of the plan and the appendix, there's more detail about what we've heard from the survey and more information about the changes made and how they came in. So I just wanted to highlight that today, that we made a tremendous amount of changes. We did that. So this has been the process so far. We've had our public hearing originally set at April 19th and had the review of the working draft. We then had the 45-day comment period and then a public hearing at this committee on June 7th. We went to the Green Zone Summit and did a presentation there on June 10th. And then we've been working furiously on this May through June revisions of the plan, and we are now here on July 12th. So the goal is to get adoption today, and then this will come before the council on July 20th, and we can start implementing the plan on July 21st. So the resolution has been included in the documents that are part of the RCA, but this is a summary of those recommendations. And then I just wanted to leave with this particular quote from one of our survey respondents, and I think it really expresses that together as a community we can achieve these goals and create a healthy, wealthy, and climate resilient community for all, with a special emphasis and priority on our neighbors living in environmental justice communities. And I also wanted to say, this is one of the things I think that everyone is affected by and everyone gets impacted by. And it's one of those things that I think, can come together as a community around, whether we have differences in race or differences in religion or differences in sexual preference or what have you. I think that everyone knows that climate is affecting us all. We need to work together on it. So thank you very much.
Thank you for the presentation. And before we move on to questions, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the loss of a local environmental justice hero, Stephanie Gasca. I'd like us all to take a moment of silence in memory of her. Thank you. Thank you all. And so we'll move on to questions. Councilmember Payne.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Havey. Obviously, this is a really robust plan, something I think more robust than we've seen in the past. And I really appreciate how you've broken down the implementation actions into categories and, the different categories around pilot, process, so on. But the one column that's missing is budget. And I think that there's a lot of consensus on this body around the need to take urgent action, and I think we all agree around the importance of the topic, but I think where the rubber meets the road is the budget. And so I'm wondering if you could just speak to, this is almost like more a process question of what are the next steps as we look at these fairly concrete actions that we ought to be taken. Do we have robust estimates for each of these actions, or do we need to start developing those estimates? Because I think it's critically important that we start assigning budget to this implementation.
Council Chair Vito and Councilmember Payne, I don't have specifics on budget to achieve the overall goals, though we have estimates on what they would cost to achieve, like if we were looking at doing 3,000 attic installations, those are $4,000 each, so that would be like $1.2 million to do 3,000 of them. But we need to do a little bit more analysis, and we are looking at that right now. We actually have an organization called Elevate from Chicago that we're consulting with to develop what we call a revenue stack for these different types of actions. So we've already initiated that work, and we'll have something in July. By the end of July, we're shooting for to be able to have some more numbers on that. I will say that we've got a lot of really solid numbers on what kinds of actions need to be done in the building sector, because we've done audits of, more than 75 different commercial buildings that have breakdowns and recommendations with cost estimates and energy savings. Each of the buildings are so different, it's kind of hard to sort of estimate, but we are going to be looking at doing a lot more work in consolidating that. One of our interns is working on looking through all of the different audits we've done on our commercial buildings over 50,000 to see where we have similarities, what the costs are, how we might be able to really promote them to go ahead and do this by either in different incentives or bringing forward suggestions on how to take advantage of federal or state incentives. But I think our next overall big plan is to look at each one of these implementation strategies we have and put some budget numbers to those, and understanding some things are moving without a big budget, like eliminating black plastic from the Good to Go ordinance, but there's a lot of other things that do have separate budgets. So we'll continue to work on that. We have, like I said, some of the stuff there, but we'll need more robust numbers.
That's great to hear, and I just want to really emphasize, we really need to work very closely with the mayor's office right now as he brings forward his budget recommendation, and I just want to invite you to also work with us if you're not seeing those dollars reflect the need. And I think that if it's not in the mayor's budget, we still need to take this quite seriously, and those of us on city council are taking this seriously, so we just want to make sure that we are making those investments where they need to be made. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Wansley.
Thank you, Chair Vital. Just want to start out with saying that, of course, climate work is a top priority, at least for this body, and it should be. And we clearly need a serious and thorough plan for decades in advancing this work to benefit, the hundreds of thousands of residents that we represent, and making sure that we're building a green economy to support that. And also, I want to give kudos to our community partners and residents who've been active in shaping this. As you named in your presentation, and after the original draft, hundreds of community members testified and contacted our offices, our staff, with feedback around having more specifics be provided, especially when it came to department leads who were overseeing certain strategies and action steps, and to have more specifics on timeline. And as Councilmember Payne just highlighted, definitely having more specificity around how we're going to fund this robust plan. But first, I wanted to ask a few clarifying questions, just digging into the actual report a bit. On page 31, we're also working on a policy for city-funded buildings focused on equity that will make buildings in underserved areas more energy efficient and resilient while costing less to operate. Again, this is on page 31. I just wanted to get clarity on who is the we. I think that's, again, a piece that wasn't fully clarified under leads. And this was also one of the areas that did not have a timeline on it. So if there's any right off the bat, if you kind of a timeline development for this particular one.
Chair Vital, Councilmember Wansley, that we are actually starting and have been discussions on that with our community planning and economic development colleagues at the city, specifically around the commercial corridor fund. And so one of the things we're working on is we're actually submitting on July 18th, the first of what would be a four-part, about $500,000 each one grant that we would use in conjunction with the commercial corridor funding, so we can then fund all the green improvements and electrification that are required, or, well, they're part of a sustainable building policy. It hasn't been fully passed, but that we've developed in draft form that would really push us into getting basically near net zero energy buildings. And so we've added these additional federal dollars that we get will be put on top of already the commercial corridor funds that CPED has to do basically a full greening of the building. And I know that one of the buildings that they're being looked at is the building that's houses Du Nord Distillery. So that's just kind of one example. They want to expand their building and expand their business. So really working with them to own that building as well as make the improvements to these old buildings. So that's an example of that. We're going to be doing that this year, initiating that this year and over the next year and a half. But it's meant to be an ongoing program that we'd support. So kind of the deal is that CPED's really, really in favor of having sustainability, but they also know it's really hard to finance these, and adding additional costs to mainly minority-owned businesses and property owners makes the deal harder to do. So we're trying to add a little bit more juice into the lemonade by looking for federal funds and funding those sustainability and energy efficiency improvements.
Awesome. And getting back to funding, I think that's a clear piece of this too. And in the report, it's referred to a couple of times in terms of the Climate Legacy Initiative, which I know the mayor's office is leading on. And I know for our community partners who were advocating for the People's Equity and Climate Plan, there was the recommendation for a Just Transition Fund. So having a dedicated fund to support this work and having some actual estimates for how much we need to raise now that we're doing a 2-year budget. What does that look like? So just for clarity, I think in the plan, while it was referred to, still it's not fully defined. What is this Climate Legacy Initiative? And also, is there funding targets that staff has come up with, because that's also not listed in the report, at least starting out for this year or the next 2 years, again, under the assumption that we're doing these biannual budgets, so that we can have a sense of, okay, here's what the city is ready to pony up, in addition to the dollars that will be coming from the state and the federal government.
Chair Vito and Councilmember Wansley, it's not specific in there because I know there's still quite a bit of negotiations going on and a lot of reviews still going on. But I can say that, our plan is to be able to get additional dollars from the city and state, federal, other sources to start to increase that and start that legacy fund for 2024. So this is, but obviously the budget process, it's going through a typical budget process. So Health Department has submitted some budget changes and to support climate action, and I think that's still under review by the mayor's office right now.
So do we even have a goal in the sense of, if you looked at all the interdepartments or departments that's listed that will be doing or using their budgets to address pieces of, these strategies or actions in the report, do we have a sense of, in 2024, we would like to have 12 million, 10 million, 5 million. Even that would be helpful, and that is not even provided. So even in that sense of, it's okay, great, you're doing negotiations, but this is the goal that we would like to start at in order to at least let folks know, here's what we're doing. And then if the state gives 2 million, if the feds give us 5 million, if it's more than that, even better. If it's less, then at least also for this body, we know before December what we should be looking at in terms of also showing we're supporting this work.
Chair Vital, Councilmember Wansley, yeah, we're going to be having more information coming out on that. Right now, we're just in the early budgeting phase, so I really can't comment on, because I'm not the one that sets the budget or makes recommendations from the Health Department in our division. We make recommendations to our bosses, and they then forward it on to the mayors, and it goes through the process. So I will say that we will have better understanding of where money sort of stack is going to be made up for different types of activities. We do have a consultant working on that right now, so we will have that for you well in advance of December when the final budget decisions are made.
Yeah, it would be great if we could have that before December, but all right. I will take a moment to at least emphasize what's really good about this plan in terms of improvements from feedback. You mentioned specifically including laborers who spoke at the last public hearing about that, and I know that's included in strategy ECW.4, where you talk about, making sure we have partnerships with unions and trades to support the underemployed entering into green career fields, and specifically even as first-time workers. That's on page 41. So just want to give kudos to that. Again, what is still a significant weakness, just in light of all this, we still don't know how much we're funding around this. We don't know how many millions of dollars we're going to be advocating or setting as a goal. What we do know is this plan is going to cost billions of dollars in order to actually be effective. And essentially a plan that does not have funding is essentially meaningless. So that is one piece that, again, we need to continue working on. And I know our community members have continued to raise this as a top priority. And hopefully we get some ready or immediate action on that, and hopefully not have to wait until August 15th when the mayor releases budget for us to get a sense of what those funding goals are. In light of that, though, I do want to take a moment at least to tell the public what our office is doing with our colleagues to get clarity or to advance at least 3 of these strategies, and especially in increasing our funding capacity. One is ensuring that our current PCAR fees are correctly recouping our expenses on pollution control. The second is working with our statewide legislators to expand municipal authority towards fees for social cost of carbon. And then third is also advancing a legislative directive to give council and the public an overview of what our IRA, those federal dollars funding opportunities are, for us to be competitive, to apply for them in the coming year. And this plan gives us a really good foundation of that. But again, we need to know how much of that. If we want to go for $5 million, we need to make sure that our plan is robustly presenting that we're ready to receive that. So we're looking forward to getting that information back, and I see that as the bare minimum we can be doing, at least on the council side, while we're waiting on the executive side. Also, lastly, what's in front of my colleagues right now is 2 motions related to providing clarity around lead departments. The first motion is to add intergovernmental relations departments to the lead department on a couple of strategies. Those strategies are listed in that first motion. I won't name them, but basically these are all strategies that in the plan, it states that they are working, or staff will be working, council members will be working with the state, county, or other intergovernmental partners that are specifically mentioned, yet IGR is not listed as a lead department in that section. So I think adding the IGR team will help with, providing that clarity and accountability. The second amendment is to remove businesses and property owners as leads, which are listed several times. Again, those are listed in the motion in terms of those specific sections. Instead, this motion asks that we list CPED and regulatory services so that we can actually leverage our authority to support or incentivize property owners and businesses to do what's outlined in that report. This body or the city does not have that type of direct oversight with vague business owners and property owners. So we want to make sure CPED, as is already done throughout the rest of the port, as listed as leads, for it to be reflected as a substitute there. So I at least wanted to give some context for those motions, and with that, I would like to move those motions for approval.
Thank you, Councilmember Wansley. After Councilmember Rainville's questions, I'll move the item along with your amendments.
Thank you.
Councilmember Rainville, you're welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So thank you so much, Kim. A couple quick questions, but first a compliment to include both so many people in this, but I really appreciate the unions because the opportunities for union paid jobs are so great. And Minnesota 350, I've really enjoyed the interactions with your group, and I see many of you here today, so thank you. In your first phase, you had 5,000 households for the weatherization program. How many households total do we need to weatherize for electrification?
About 40,000.
40,000. Okay, thank you. And then when you talk about recycling and composting to reduce that by 80%, how much of that depends on county help? Clearly they're involved in this. We can't do it by ourselves.
Right. Chair Vito and Councilmember Rainville, that is absolutely right. Hennepin County is very involved in doing a lot of the different efforts on reducing plastics and things like that. And we want to be able to, work with Hennepin County on some of their other ideas for composting, and they're looking at some ideas on doing anaerobic digestion and things like that. And obviously we need to work with them. There's been in regards to how we use the continued use of the downtown energy center or the garbage incinerator. So yes, we have a lot of integration with them. Right now we're at about 50% sort of recycling, reuse, composting rate. So we need to get that to at least, the goal is to get that to at least 80% by 2030. But yes, it's going to have to be a close partnership with Hennepin County.
Great, thank you. One last question, Madam Chair. The Natural Gas Investment Act, offline, maybe next week if you have the time, I'd like to learn more about that and how you would partner with CenterPoint Energy on that.
Chair Vito, Councilmember Rainville, certainly I'll set up meeting up with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I just want to say I'm so proud of our staff. You all have done a phenomenal job on this. Yes. And I'm also really proud of this community. You know, I heard a lot from Northsiders, and I see a lot of them in this room right now who don't usually participate in this process. But the staff here at the city opened the door and created seats at the table for everyone to be heard. I know we didn't get as much participation as we had hoped for, but you all really did a good job. And I'm proud of this plan. I know we got to find some money, and that's up to me and my colleagues to keep this work going, even if we're not here. I'm looking forward to working with you all and the community. My favorite thing about this plan is that things can change. We can work on things, and if it's not working out, we can pick something else. There's a lot of work for us to do, and I'm excited that we're going to get it done. Thank you all so much. And is there any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, I will move for approval of this item along with Councilmember Wansley's amendments, the two. If this body agrees, I see no one not agreeing. So all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay. That carries, and this item will be forwarded to the next council meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The next item is receiving and filing a presentation on the findings from the 2022-2023 Green Zone Program Evaluation. Here to present on this is Kelly Molman from the Health Department and April Mendez from the Green Print Partners. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much, Chair Vita and council members. My name is Kelly Molman. I'm Manager of Environmental Programs in the Minneapolis Health Department. For the past 8 years, I've had the pleasure of serving as the Sustainability Program Coordinator in our Sustainability Office and had the opportunity to really help the Green Zones get off the floor and going. So I'm really excited to be here to share the results of our evaluation of the last several years of this work. So I'll give a brief background on the Green Zones and then hand it over to April Mendez to give the actual detailed findings from the evaluation. And I will note that we do have handouts that I believe all the council members have received, but also for individuals in the audience, there's handouts, both the slides that we'll be presenting and a list of accomplishments from the last several years. So just to reiterate what the Green Zones are, the Green Zones Initiative is a place-based policy aimed at improving health and supporting economic development using environmentally conscious efforts in communities that face the cumulative effects of environmental pollution, as well as social, political, and economic vulnerability. So we're talking about an environmental justice policy that is really focused in specific neighborhoods of the city of Minneapolis. In 2016 and 2017, we had a citywide working group that both identified the priorities for the Green Zones and then based on those priorities, used data to understand what our existing conditions are and what areas should be identified and designated as Green Zones. So the list of that data is here. There was a variety of both environmental and equity or socioeconomic and demographic and health outcome data. Using that data, we put that into GIS and overlapped it. So taking a combination of both all of those environmental factors and all of the equity factors resulted in the map that you see here, and the green boundary is the designation of the north side and the south side green zones that was adopted by City Council in April of 2017. So for this slide, I really just kind of want to, again, set us up for receiving the recommendations from this evaluation and giving the context of even why we did the evaluation in the first place. So in 2021, we were able to, Green Zone members and I were able to give a presentation to council on the work accomplished up to that point, which in particular was focusing on the 5-year work plans that the north side and the south side Green Zone had each developed and adopted for themselves in 2019 and 2020. In that presentation to you all, we kind of called that work phase 2, the creation of the work plans, and that we wanted to transition into phase 3, implementation. And we were asking for support, which included funding and resources both to facilitate the reimagining of the Green Zone's structure and as well as community-led projects to implement work plans. You'll hear more about the community-led projects in the evaluation. Additionally, we requested support from you all, city departments and the mayor's office to work with sustainability to review and improve the work plans and incorporate them into policies and programs. And additionally, to identify a path forward for long-term structure and support for the green zones. That fall of 2021, City Council used the city budget process to allocate, and I quote, one-time funds to hire consultants who will work with the mayor, the city council, and city staff and members of the Northside and Southside Green Zones councils to assess the success and challenges of the city's green zones efforts and present recommendations for improvement. This evaluation work will identify a series of city resources and internal strategies that will be needed to implement the Green Zone Council's work plans and policy recommendations. So in 2022, upon receiving those resources, we followed the city's standard RFP process. Green Zone members participated in the review of applications and actually the establishment of the request for proposals itself. And then we selected Greenprint Partners as the Green Zone evaluation consultant. So at this time, I'd like to welcome up April Mendez to provide the results.
Welcome.
Chair Vita and committee members, thank you so much for having us today, and thank you, Kelly, for that introduction. I want to acknowledge the presence of numerous Green Zone members in the room today, a couple of whom will be invited up to speak and share some of their thoughts on the recommendations. That will be Michael Cheney and Kosar Mohammed, who will also join me at the podium shortly. So the evaluation process, I'll give a quick overview here. This included a review of historical documents, participation in and facilitation of discussions at Green Zone Committee meetings, interviews with 31 individuals across city departments, Green Zone committees, and current and former council members, as well as some of the prior consultants who were involved in aspects of establishing and facilitating the green zones. Additionally, we surveyed relevant city departments and have included analysis of 19 responses in these findings. And the findings that I present are going to include some illustrative quotes from interviews and survey responses. I'll note that the presentation that you have in front of you is much more comprehensive than the presentation that we'll be giving today because we don't have time to go through all of the findings. So you'll find a lot of those illustrative quotes in the slides that are in front of you, and for folks who are able to get handouts, they're also in your copy. So first, I want to just say the evaluation would certainly not have been possible without the dedication of both the North Side and the South Side Green Zone members and the city staff that support them. We also had participation from myriad interviewees. As I said, we interviewed 31 different individuals, and so thank you to them for the time that they dedicated and the passion and honesty with which they spoke. And then finally, the survey respondents. In some cases, these are actually collected input that were gathered across an entire department in order to inform a singular departmental response. All right, so now I want to hop into the findings, but as we kind of set the stage for the findings, I'd just like to remind us all that the green zones exist because racism is a public health crisis in the city of Minneapolis. And while we have all been experiencing the impacts of, say, poor air quality over the past couple of years from wildfires, for Green Zone residents, this is something that is just compounding a reality that they have lived with for a very long time every single day. And that racist redlining policies and decades of institutional planning and investment decisions have led to cumulative impacts that severely limit quality of life and access to opportunities. That's exemplified by any number of statistics. Just a couple of examples. Asthma rates in the green zones are 4 to 5 times higher than they are for the rest of the 7-county metro area. Childhood lead poisoning rates are double and triple the rates of statewide lead poisoning. You can kind of throw a dart at the wall and pick any statistic, and you'll see the evidence of these racist inequities in the lived experiences of Green Zone members. And so that's what's at stake in ensuring the success of the Green Zones initiative. So I'm going to open with the strengths that we found. The first strength is that the committees themselves, that is the residents of Green Zones and city staff who are non-voting members, have themselves on their own power generated significant tangible community leadership for environmental justice issues in each of their communities. And that's exemplified by the sheer number of brute hours that they have put in, both in the committee meetings, the leadership planning of committee meetings, the invitations to guest speakers to come in and consider ways to collaborate with Green Zone members. And additionally, outside of those committee meetings, these members have raised $800,000 to support initiatives, including 19 different initiatives that they have either funded or themselves launched and supported. They have leveraged or helped direct funding to 13 community projects that advance Green Zone goals and work plans. With the leadership of Northside Green Zone member Leslie Jackson, they ran a youth billboard design competition, which you also see evidence of in the t-shirts that folks are wearing today. Youth Congress members have been brought on to the Northside Green Zone Task Force to increase youth leadership within the Green Zone initiatives. They have implemented a grassroots community communications campaign in the South Side that features community designed and installed yard signs in multiple languages. They have launched a youth environmental workforce program and have sustained this for now more than 2 years with leadership from Michael Cheney and Marquita Keys. They have gotten 70 community air quality monitors paid for and installed across their neighborhoods. They have launched a pilot program for edible boulevards on the north side with leadership from Michelle Shaw. And they have generated some policy change by getting Green Zone development criteria incorporated into the city's new sustainable building policy for municipal buildings. They have been busy, and very passionately so, and all of their numerous accomplishments I don't have time to represent today, so you have a lengthy handout also in your packet with a more comprehensive listing of those accomplishments. The second strength is that the geographic designation itself, the establishment of the boundaries of the green zones and the concept of the green zones has actually been a powerful vehicle for change. As you can see here in the upper left quote, the health department leverages the boundaries to make green zones a primary focus for their programs and currently drives an estimated 70 or 60% of their funding there. In the quote on the bottom left, you see that utilities, through approval by the Minnesota Department of Commerce, have also made rebates and incentives easier to access for green zone property owners and apartment dwellers. In the top right, you see that Public Works has applied for $24 million for lead service line replacements in the green zones. And in the bottom right, you see that Neighborhood and Community Relations has integrated green zones into their grant funding review process and co-hosted an annual Green Zone Summit. Additionally, the list of investments doesn't end here. Green Zone residents have received free home energy squad visits, 0% loans for energy efficiency and solar retrofits, along with $2.5 million in cost sharing for energy efficiency retrofits. They've received a green career exploration program, air quality monitoring, free and discounted trees, public green stormwater infrastructure projects with native plants, additional credits on stormwater utility bills for residents who install rain gardens or pervious pavement, and investments in lead abatement and other healthy home treatments. These investments, I just want to contextualize this, that these investments signal that there is emerging momentum from within city departments, but what you're about to hear is also that much more needs to be done. A final strength is that there are some city departments who are proactively really considering ways to grow their efforts. So again, coming back to that idea that there is some momentum here. A survey respondent from the health department sees opportunities, quote, to do more as a team to understand and integrate the vision and values of the green zones as they align with specific RFPs or partner eligibility efforts, and when developing their next biennial budget. You see that the Public Works Department will be adding the green zones as a layer in the transportation equity priority areas. We also heard from Director Havey just a minute ago that there's also evidence of additional momentum in the climate equity plan that will be focused on green zones. That brings me now to the barriers, which I will share a bit more about in context of the recommendations that I'm going to present. So it's clear from the strengths that have surfaced, as I said, that there is momentum to leverage as the Green Zones initiative continues. However, there are also critical barriers that are significantly constraining progress. These include trust between the city and Green Zone committees is low and is further being deteriorated by high-profile conflicts. Secondly, the committee recommendations lack teeth. They are an advisory body only, as are all committees. There is limited buy-in and awareness from city departments that's really necessary to advance green zone goals. The buy-in and awareness is largely embodied in people and not in the full departmental commitment. Committees have a narrow voice that is not seen as being broadly representative of stakeholders within the green zones, and committees feel that there isn't strong enough public awareness and engagement from within the represented neighborhoods. So now I'm going to elaborate on these by discussing the recommendations. So the first recommendation is to launch a public reporting dashboard that seeks to address the first two barriers, which were low trust and a lack of teeth in the committee's recommendations. And so to speak to this recommendation, I'd like to introduce Michael Cheney, a founding member of the Northside Green Zone Task Force. Please welcome up Michael.
Welcome, Mr. Cheney. Good to see you.
Good to see you as always. North Minneapolis is going green. Give us a call and learn what we mean. Where once lie urban blight, now sits luscious garden sites. Gardens without borders, classrooms without walls, architects of our own destinies, access to food, justice for all. And now, like sweet potato vines, our missions and goals all intertwine. Good day, everyone. My name is Michael Cheney. I'm an activist and organizer. In the 80s, I was the founder of the Minnesota Juneteenth celebration. In the 90s, I was the founder of the Wendell Phillips Credit Union in South Minneapolis. And in 2010, when North High came under attack, and there were school administrators who threatened to close the school, myself and others pushed back, because we felt that the killing of the school is the killing of heart of any community. And so in all good conscience, we couldn't sit back and watch that happen. As a result of that, we approached North High. They had a green room that had been abandoned for over 10 years by some other missteps on school administrators who felt that life skills wasn't critical, that we should focus on technology. And so that's really what we've been doing, is really trying to turn that trend, to recognize that, you know, that all people matter, and that all issues are an environmental issue. And so through that process, we've created the first urban farm legislation in the nation. It's an agri-grant that we created. Why? Because we couldn't get the support from the city. We couldn't get the support, needed support from the county. And so we had to take it to a higher court in the land. And that's why we went to the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, and with the help of Karen Clark, created, like I said, the first known urban farm legislation in the nation. With that, any school, any nonprofit, any faith-based community can apply for up to $50,000 to birth green projects. And so we've been following that process. Through that process, we move forward to create a pathway to higher education, Growing North Minneapolis, with the University of Minnesota in partnership with the CFAN and Egg Education. And last year, Growing North Minneapolis' initiative, we were named their Partnership of the Year. This year, we went further, and we, through the Minnesota Department Climate Adaptation Award, we were recognized as their climate adaptation champion of the world. So sometimes we must work within the system and sometimes without the system. Is the glass half full or is the glass half empty? And so in reviewing, as again, I am one of the founding members through EJCC, Sam Grant and James Trice. I'm one of the founding members of the Northside Green Zone. I'm also on the Midwest Farmers of Color, and so wear many hats and interface with building partnerships, not only locally, but even nationally. And so in reviewing, as one of my obligations toward the Green Zone, in reviewing this process, and as an advocate and watchdog, one of the things that has bothered me, that now we know that there's this plethora of funding that's coming from everywhere, from the federal government. And so, again, it means that we need to be vigilant to make sure that those people who have applied for these funding, whether or not it's city, county, or state, are not just usurping on the misery of poor, marginalized communities, but that money is supposedly to help lift us up and out of poverty. And so in reviewing the recommendations and in helping prepare this document, it became very clear to me that we needed to have much more intensive analysis in creating a dashboard. As we see workforce growth numbers grow, it's critical that we monitor those numbers. Is the money going to those who claim that they're being claimed to serve? As we see now roundabouts around roundabouts, are those people who are building these, are building these roundabouts, are we part of that equation, or are we just being run around again? And so that's why we think that it's important that there be more vigilance applied to, more analysis in terms of, are those companies that are coming into our community from rural communities, from suburban communities, it must be mandatory that they are hiring people in our community, BIPOC residents, marginalized people, low-income residents, or otherwise we might have greater infrastructure, but we failed miserably in addressing. And so that's why we're here. That's why I was asked to speak, and urge you to put more thought in terms of review and making sure that we have some form of scale in terms of, are the people that are being hired to do this infrastructure work, are they people from our communities? And is there a way that we can measure that we are indeed lifting people up and out of poverty? I want to just, let equity and inclusion be the seeds that fuel our nation's future. That's what the Biden administration asked for, and I think that we must be vigilant to that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Mr. Cheney. So want to add just a little bit of extra color on that recommendation. So what the Green Zone committees are looking for is a singular public platform where they can see how much change has actually happened on the environmental justice indicators that have been used to define the green zones in the first place, and what kind of investments are going into the green zones, and are they proportionately being shared with the green zones versus other areas of the city as well. And so they would like something that includes some immersive mapping, clearly this kind of clarification on what progress has been made on the metrics. So that is recommendation one. The second recommendation is around policy change, which is to accelerate near-term policy change that adds policy teeth to the committee's recommendations, given that they, like all committees, have only advisory power. There is momentum towards policy change with the creation of the green zones, the adoption of green zone development criteria, and the current active involvement of the committees in the zoning update process. However, there are still no policies in place that aggressively reduce and place caps on the cumulative negative environmental and social impacts that these residents face. The third recommendation is to invest in the staff capacity of city staff to build internal awareness, alignment, and action for the green zones. This addresses the barrier of the limited buy-in and awareness that we saw within city departments. We found that there is significant desire within a handful of city departments to engage more fully in addressing green zone goals, but a single dedicated staff coordinator, as phenomenal as Kelly Mullman is, and everyone named her without exception, for the 7 years that she has invested in making this initiative successful. But still, a single dedicated full-time staff coordinator does not have the capacity to both support the Green Zone committees, that grassroots effort in 2 areas of the city, and also advance some significant and sustained collaboration within multiple departments within the city. And so the emphasis has been more so on the side of supporting the committees and the grassroots effort. And she has, I know, done really valiantly, invested as much time as she possibly can in also supporting collaborations and engaging city departments. The city departments that we talked to said, we'd love to build more awareness across our teams. We'd love to spend more time aligning our work with Green Zone goals, but we need more capacity to do that. So this is currently leaving us in a situation where you've got departments, each with hundreds and even thousands of staff members to be made aware of and integrated into Green Zone planning processes, where those departments are just not being as effectively brought into work plan goals as they need to. And the collaborations are only happening in short bursts and not leading to enough sustained progress. And the work plan goals themselves aren't as realistic and as feasible as they could be if they were being collaboratively created and adapted. So the recommendation here is for a minimum of 2 full-time staff members plus a dedicated Green Zone liaison within each department that is given both the responsibility and the workload capacity to advance Green Zone goals in partnerships with the committees. And to speak further to this recommendation, I'd like to invite Kosar Mohammed, a leadership member of the Southside Green Zone Council.
Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Vita and committee members. My name is Kosar Mohammed. My pronouns are she, her, and ayada. And I serve as a member of the Southside Green Zones, long-term resident of Ward 6, and really have been profoundly impacted by the role of Kelly and really just the profound time that she's put in and dedicated to this work. She's worked 7 days a week, 24 hours, 365 days, and she has really made it a dedication of hers to really ensure that it's paramount that this city shows up both at the top grass and at the grassroots level. That has been fairly impactful in ensuring that we across the city are being a part of this process, but we haven't felt that dedication in the equity of that dedication showing in the staffing of this particular initiative, right? So with dedication, that's investment, we'll actually be able to see the management of the issues that this city is facing around the climate crisis being measured. If you actually have FTE that are dedicated to this function of this work from a larger and expansive way, we would be able to see more time and capacity added to the sustainability team, added to the community members. We have around 45,000 community members across the north side and the green zones, and across the north side and south side. Folks don't have the capacity to be able to offer 7 days a week, 9 to 5, 5 to 9 towards this initiative. There needs to be more dedicated staff. There needs to be staff that can be able to do this work across the board, across the vertical leadership, and really be aware of what is the challenges this city is facing, both from a policy standpoint, planning standpoint, and really from a built environment standpoint. Having staff that are really being able to understand the implications of what it is the dollars are that are being being dedicated to this effort and what isn't being dedicated to this effort is going to be key. So for us, again, really bringing in that it's paramount to have further FTE members. Having one FTE in a VISTA isn't enough. And it doesn't signal that this city is dedicated towards the climate crisis that we're experiencing. We see it through the air quality. We see our elders being locked up in their homes and too frightened to go outdoors and to take walks. Many of our members are living in what is considered a concrete jungle, and walkability is a difficulty for many. Many can't afford access to healthy opportunities to have fitness and accessibility, and we're not facing 4 seasons anymore in Minnesota. It's really looking like 2 seasons. So the reality is here, it is knocking on our doors, and we need more dedicated staff, more dedicated funding and time towards this work. So it's not the situation of we're being reactive rather than proactive. So that's all that I would like to share with you all today.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Kosar. Okay, next recommendation is to lean into that momentum that's already been established with some of the collaborations with city departments. There are some really tangible partnerships that have been established and that really hold a lot of promise for much greater impact if there is that capacity for deeper and more sustained collaboration. And as I said, there is desire across the board, and it just needs to be fueled with resources and focus. And these collaborations, just to continue this recommendation, these collaborations are a critical avenue through which to build trust. So the collaborations themselves need to embody the principles and practices that honor the value of Green Zone residents. Some practices that have been requested include ensuring early and sustained engagement of Green Zone committees in project planning processes, creating opportunities for meaningful input and co-design from the outset of project development, respecting, recognizing, and allocating resources for the work of the Green Zone committees, which includes compensation for committee members who are the only ones in the room who are not paid to be there, and being accountable for following through and providing a feedback loop on the recommendations and requests that have been made by Green Zone committees. This again just underscores how critical it is to provide ample resources to both city staff and the Green Zone members to engage in healthy collaboration. The next recommendation speaks to the final 2 barriers, which are that city staff see Green Zone committees as having a narrow voice that is not representative enough of local businesses, nonprofits, and a diversity of residents, which leads them to engage with Green Zone committees as just one stakeholder group on a list, rather than as the go-to group for consultation within the Green Zones. Secondly, committee members themselves feel that their representation of their community's diversity needs to be enhanced, especially when it comes to Native, immigrant, and refugee communities. And they're all experiencing some level of burnout without a deep enough bench of leaders. They want to have the resources to build more public awareness and participation across the neighborhoods. And then our final recommendation, the committees need financial resources that they can count on and plan around. To date, resources have been provided in response to specific requests. Moving to a regular annual budget allocation from the mayor's budget would enable committees to shift to longer-term planning and programming to advance their goals. One interviewee recommended that $500,000 be provided annually, alongside some broad goals that the committees could invest the funds towards advancing. And this brings me to the end of the presentation. So I want to thank you all, Chair Vita and committee members, for your thoughtful attention, and also invite Kelly back up, and we look forward to your comments and questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation, and I see that we have questions from Councilmember Ellison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Less questions, just a few comments about the presentation and maybe a few thank yous. First, I do want to say that, Kelly, if you're actually working 24/7, you might have like a wage theft case to be made against the city. But seriously, your dedication and your commitment to this work is well noted, and I'll be yet another person adding your name to the pile of thank yous and acknowledgments here. And then I wanted to thank staff and community for the presentation. Sometimes here at the city, presentations that we give on the work that we're doing can kind of feel like really extended pats on the back of ourselves, you know. And you know, I come from a arts background and tradition where critique is sort of central to how you improve your skill set, and it's not a negative thing, and it's not a degrading thing on your capacity as an artist, but it's there to help you improve. And so to see the presentation talk about front-loaded with the things that we are doing, the good work that we are doing, but also with these recommendations that are critical, that are challenging us up here to improve this program, I think is really refreshing to see, and it's really refreshing to see staff sort of leaning into that, taking that on, and sort of presenting it as a part of your work instead of as a sort of a failing of your work or anything. And I'll just say, when you've got folks collaborating with you like Elder Cheney and Roxanne O'Brien, like, you better be pretty thick-skinned. And so it's not a surprise to see the critiques, the ways we can improve, the challenges to us here as a body on how we can support this program improving, be represented in the presentation this way. So just a couple of thank yous to community members and to staff for the way that you've presented this information to us today.
Thank you. Councilmember Wansley.
Thank you, Chair Vital. Also want to say thank you for highlighting some of the work that, you know, especially in alignment with the climate equity plan, what we're doing to move forward, but also emphasizing, as Councilmember Ellison just highlighted, some of the barriers that we need to reconcile in order for us to really actually move forward. And I take the first barrier that you listed in terms of the breakdown of trust between the city and the green zones very seriously. And I think of, you mentioned, you know, controversial situations that really surface that. And I can immediately think of the Roof Depot site specifically that took up a lot of our space last year, and that's also entirely located in the green zone. And yet the city was still planning to move forward with a highly polluting development that, you know, had tons of opposition from the very communities that you all work with. And I also want to name that seriously damaged our credibility as a city and amongst the public, and really put a question mark on how seriously do we actually take our green zones, and especially knowing that, you know, the green zones participant list that you listed out, many of those folks were part of the East Phillips Farm or East Phillips Indoor Farm initiative for over 10 years and have been raising. Here's an opportunity for us to actually set a new precedent. And we said no many times for 10 years. So I just want to emphasize, you know, similar to like public safety, and we're about to have a conversation on that soon with Dr. Artelli, there is a huge gap between what the city is saying and then what we often do. And that is not good for our credibility, especially in the community. And I hope that this report that you've provided us today can help us as we hopefully exert political will to move into a new era of taking our green zones seriously, and making sure we do that through, as you emphasize, providing dollars. Same with the equity plan. You need funding to execute this work. You need staff. You need bodies. You can't do this voluntarily. And as much as MN 350 y'all are dope, you should not have to carry the burden of contesting or helping our city prepare for the repeated climate catastrophes that happens under our climate change reality. That should not fall on your shoulders alone when we have a $1.7 billion budget that you all provide through your taxes to help do that work. So I just want to say thank you for, again, offering the sober reality that we're in terms of how we can show up better, especially for this body, but also saying, okay, here are the strides that we've made over time. Kudos to that, keep going, but here's where we need to show up to. So thank you all so much for your work.
Thanks again. Thanks again for the presentation. Seeing no further discussion, I'll direct the clerk to receive and file the report. Thanks. Our final discussion is receiving and filing a presentation by Dr. Antonio Aftili on the recommendations contained within the Minneapolis Safe and Thriving Communities Report. Oh, there he is on that side. I don't know if that door's open. Okay. We'll give him a minute. welcome Dr. Aptili. Thank you so much for waiting and being patient with us.
Some amazing presentations that you had and some very important work that everyone has been doing. So fantastic I love listening in. So thank you, Chair Vita and council members, for allowing me to present here today the final version of the Safe and Thriving Communities Plan. It's been a fun journey of working with all of the, the community members, city executives, and of course city council to move this forward. What I was hoping to do today is primarily just give a real high-level overview of the report and some of the findings and some of the actions that we see coming forward. And then primarily to spend some time engaging in any questions and dialogue around next steps and just any questions you may have on the actual report. So first of all, just get a little bit of context on the overall development of the report, which many of you may remember. We started thinking about this work in 2020, having some dialogue with city executives, with stakeholders in the city, and briefly with City Council as well, to think about, can we develop a plan around public safety, community safety, that takes a leap forward, that says what is a new construct, a new operating model for public safety going forward? How do we have more integration of services? And importantly, how do we look more holistically at what community safety looks like and safe and thriving communities look like? So we had developed a team around that work, started very diligently in 2022 doing research, speaking with many city organizations, community stakeholder groups, city executives across that year to better understand what was currently happening in the city, best practices happening at the community level, innovations happening with community-based services, as well as in the innovation that was currently happening in the city. We also took a look broadly nationwide at best practices from other jurisdictions, the way they were operating and doing work. So more or less distilling what is the art of the possible for the future of public safety. And so then from end of 2022 into 2023, worked on developing the overall writing of the report and drafting in the final version that you see here. So the Safe and Thriving Communities Plan really is a transformational plan, a vision for the city that, as I mentioned yesterday in the city briefing, I believe is something that will enable Minneapolis, if this plan is enacted, to really lead the nation in re-looking at how public safety and community safety services are delivered. And so in many ways, we're aspiring in this report to answer the community demand that came from 2020 and really before for new forms of outcomes from public safety. And so this report, as somewhat of a North Star, tries to get to that, looking at what forms of new value and outcomes, legitimacy and trust can we have in community safety and in government as a whole. The core of the report really is looking at how do we in Minneapolis develop a continuum of services. So if we were to take a look at communities, individuals, families, and the root causes of safety challenges, the root causes of disorder challenges, but also the areas that lift up families and communities to thrive in their lives. What can we do to help enable that, to foster those safe and thriving communities? So what services are needed? Historically, across most of the country, right, we have human services that are somewhat silo-based and delivered as needed in social services. Policing services are quite separate. Some cities have services that help communities with trauma, but no one is really looking at it in a continuum and integrating them all together. So we've looked at that continuum in Minneapolis and packaged that, so to say, under three categories of work. One what would be called preventive services, so services that, such as peacemakers, violence prevention, diversion, et cetera, that address the near-term social, economic, and health conditions and challenges before they manifest as criminal behavior or public disorder. The second major category is responsive services, so things that address incidents in real time through various forms of response, which I'll get into in the next slide. And then third would be restorative services. So services that that heal trauma over the long term, that respond to communities where there may have been a traumatic incident, that help that community build capacity for resilience over time, and that connect back into the overall preventive services as well. So if you envision this as a continuum in one way, from preventive to restorative, but also as a circle that wraps around an individual or family or community, that's the overall thrust of what we're trying to do here, is say, how can we develop an entirely new model of community safety with this array of services that help enable safe and thriving communities. And a big component of that as well is the community engagement with all three of these areas to make sure that those services and solutions are co-produced with community, so that it's the community saying, here's what we need to feel safe and to thrive in our environment, and how do we turn that into services that are deployed by government or by community-based providers, nonprofit organizations, et cetera. And so that continuum of services, or that ecosystem, is really a multitude of different providers, government, community, city, county, nonprofit, et cetera, that all collaborate together to deliver this new model of safety. We've got a lot of questions on what this means for policing over the past few days, and so I wanted to make sure I talked a bit about that as well. We do view in this report policing services, sworn officers, as part of that service continuum. And we see this as police officers as a vital part, of course, of that service continuum as well. That being said, we do see an opportunity in the report, there's a whole section in it, on how the Minneapolis Police Department can improve and develop new ways to respond in near-term ways. So there's 4 categories within the responsive services as well. One, and the city is already making some progress on this, is around virtual response. There historically have been a number of incidents, issues that come through various channels, whether it's someone calling 911, or they go to 311, or they call a department, or maybe they call a city council member and say, can you handle this particular issue, whether it's an abandoned car, or someone stole my bike, or there's maybe a house that someone needs to check on that seems empty. So a number of different types of incidents that virtual response may be able to handle. Very selectively and very intentionally, looking at what types of issues can be handled that way, as a mechanism to free up time and resources, become more efficient, and move those resources into other forms of response. The second major category under the responsive services is civilian response. You have had in Minneapolis some wonderful work already with BCR and Canopy on this type of civilian response to mental health challenges. We have a major section report on that, how to scale that up and how to improve that over time. The third category is multidisciplinary co-response. This is an area right now in Minneapolis that's relatively not some initiatives and research happening on that, but there should be some more robust work done to pair multidisciplinary response professionals to various types of incidents. And so that category of near-term responsive service is detailed in the report as well. And then lastly is sworn officer response. We all know that there are just certain incidents and challenges in the community where you have to have a badge and a gun show up, and that is, of course, something that won't, that every city needs, and that is going to be continuously improved through ongoing reforms by the city, as well as external oversight by the state and the federal government. On that particular piece, we had a lot of questions as well on, does this plan, how does it relate to consent decrees? People say, does this replace a consent decree? Of course it does not. We view this plan as a roadmap, more of a, you could say, a transformational roadmap that is very much complementary to consent decrees. And in many ways, I would go as far as to say provides a template, so to say, where you can put the consent decrees underneath this for overall transformation. Consent decrees will work on the core reform of sworn officer response, right? So essentially about 1/16 or so of this overall plan, the consent decrees will work on. So looking at officer use of force and accountability, and how officers do stops and detentions, and how they work with people in crisis, et cetera. This plan, the Safe and Thriving Communities Plan, is much more broad and transformative in the way we look at community safety overall. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear as possible for community moving forward here. How we start and grow this work a bit, and we do have a slide here that talks about where the city may want to start this work. But one thing I would like to mention before that is this will, as I mentioned, is a roadmap. It's going to take years to really put the entire vision in place and to build it out over time and scale it up, depending on how much is invested and the pace at which the city and the city council and stakeholders want to move forward. Will determine this ecosystem, this network of services, and how much they grow over time. And so there is a growth strategy that is implied and talked about in this report that says as the city moves forward, you'll have growth in the types of services that are offered under this continuum, but also in the ability to learn from those services, to develop them over time, to be able to analyze them and measure them, to know what's effective, what's efficient, and then to invest more in those services that work, and tailor things or improve services that may need to be optimized. So over time, that service continuum, that ecosystem will grow more powerful, more effective. And so a key thing for city council members, but really importantly for community, is to know that this was not going to be something turned on overnight. This is going to require some real diligent investment and analysis and design and professional development. And as you move forward year over year, it'll become better over time. As I mentioned at the onset, this is something that no other city has taken as expansive or robust vision for community safety as what's in this report. There have been cities that are doing various pieces of this that we learn from and we document in the report that are perhaps further ahead than Minneapolis in many ways in certain categories, but no city has done all of this as what's in this report. So this is new territory to some degree, and it's going to take time to build out that ecosystem and the growth around that. I'm confident, though, that with the support of City Council, with strong city leadership, with exceptional collaboration, which needs to be worked on across the city and county, that this work can be done in Minneapolis. And I think that this city can lead the nation on this type of work. A big component of leading the nation and working on this is becoming a knowledge city, a knowledge organization, particularly around this community safety. So one of the underpinning elements to this that is documented in the report is the need for Minneapolis to better understand what works and what doesn't work. So there's significant work and investment in being able to analyze this ecosystem of services, to learn from them, as I mentioned, what's working, what needs to be improved, to coordinate those services and programs across agencies, across sectors, and to be able to use analytics to better understand what's working in real time and to deploy these services in real time. If you jumped out ahead in the future a bit, we want to see here a future where, as incidents happen across the city, 911, for example, can mix and match services dynamically, that they have the ability to pull from every piece of that continuum of services, whether it's preventive or responsive or restorative, and be able to deploy those in real time. Right now, the city tries occasionally, but doesn't have the ability. For example, if there's an incident that happens in a community, heaven forbid, some type of shooting, and someone is dramatically hurt, there's a level of trauma that happens in that community. You may send out officers, sworn officers. Very rarely is it that the city can also, in real time, send out someone that can help with trauma, and that can also help with prevention to stop something else from happening directly after that incident, and to connect it all back into restorative, so that there's this continuum that wraps around that community. We want this to be just a really robust system that's dynamically deployed, meaning just in real time, very quickly, and importantly, that these services and the people delivering these services collaborate and work together. We all know, for the history of policing and public safety and social services and human services and fire, et cetera, that collaborative nature isn't necessarily there. And that's an ongoing tension. There's sections in this report for all three of these major categories where we talk about what needs to happen from the governance and leadership standpoint, from the policy and practice standpoint, from the services and infrastructure standpoint, as well as the human capital and collaboration standpoint, in order to really enable that type of robust response. Let me jump ahead to this launch list. The city has asked for ideas on how to jumpstart this work in 2023, what would be a good way to start moving forward. And so we developed a launch list that distills many of the core items in this report and says, what can you start doing in 2023 to work directly on this. The list that you have in front of you here is not sequential, so it doesn't, don't have to go 1 through 5. I would argue almost that 1 and 5 are probably two of the most important things to work on right away, with 5 being, and I heard from the previous presenters as well, the need for community dashboard and ability to track progress, to right away signal to the community that the city is serious about moving forward on transformation. So how do we document what we're going to do and have a dashboard that shows progress on that? And that, I think, is one of the core things that should be stood up right away, along with the first item, their action item number 1, which is an executive leadership team and a community advisory board to help guide this work. The Safe and Thriving Communities Plan is really rigorous and robust. It's 145 some pages with pages and pages of recommendations. It will, though, need community members to be part of this, to say, we've read the plan, here's how we see this working in our communities, here's what we need to move forward on first, how we co-create with community, and how the community members can really guide the overall process with city executives and with city council as we move forward. So that establishing the executive leadership team and community advisory board will be exceptionally important. From there, in very near term, and again, these aren't sequential, these should be happening at the same time, and right now we're in budget season, right? So the second item is developing a multi-year implementation and financial plan. It'll be critically important for the city to come to city council in the coming weeks with a plan for a budget to start seeding this work. And that will in large part depend on the depth of transformation that the city wants to take on and that the city council wants to take on, with the how rigorous you want to move forward with this, as well as the pace of that implementation. So how quickly do we want to try and ramp up these services and get this Safe and Thriving Communities Plan moving? And so those two levers, so to say, will determine how much you may need to invest in the near term in order to get this started. From there's also developing some governance and operations plans. As I mentioned, there's a whole section in the report on governance and operations that document not only the good things that are happening right now in Minneapolis, and there are a lot of really positive and productive things happening around governance and operations, but also the documents where the limitations are, where some of the challenges are, where the sticking points are, and so recommend some tactics and some strategies for how to move past those barriers to really effectively bring the city together to move forward on this plan. And from there, it's initiating some of these policy and committee work groups at the various levels of services to move forward. So we have provided the city with this launch list. As for my estimation on this is, I think it's very important within 2023 to get movement on this launch list. I think all of us know that we've, as one person in the hallway told me a few minutes ago, the city has been admiring this problem for a long time. And I'm hoping that one of the functions of this plan is to be able to align people, to say we have a common vision now and a plan to move forward, so that we can stop doing all of the analysis and start really moving into building this future out. So this launch list, I think, will help move the city towards that. If I go back up a slide and talk a bit about proposed investment, I don't have exact numbers, because again, this is something that the city needs to look and say, how quickly can we move on this? What do we need to do to fill in some staff and some analysis and whatnot? But there are these 4 categories I would estimate that the city should come forward with. One is city staffing. There will be personnel needed for preventive and restorative services, and these sometimes, these are community-based organizations as well. So it's people that are working on the ground to deliver some of these services that are documented in the report. As well as city employees that may be involved in program evaluation and analytics and operations. So the city will be looking at what will it take to actually have the city staffing as well as community staffing in place to move forward on this. The second major category is around development of those actual services. So how do you phase them in? How do you ramp them up, grow that ecosystem of services? You are very well aware of many of the community-based services that are currently being operated, and the challenges and opportunities as well as scaling those up. So budgeting around that service continuum and how to move that forward. Third is investment around analytics and service management technology and software and things that enable collaboration. So another fundamental piece to this plan is infrastructure. So for example, the city really needs to move forward on 911 transformation. The Performance and Innovation Office, has done some work on that before to document what needs to take place. We also documented steps within the plan here. We worked with the University of Chicago and their health lab to look at their work around transforming 911 nationwide, and to leverage some of those insights, and those are in the plan. In order for 911 to be able to with agility, understand what these services are, be able to deploy them again in real time, and to be able to do that with a health lens, with an equity lens, to get the best possible outcomes from any type of response that's sent out. So, the 911 services right now are very basic in Minneapolis, and there's going to be a lot of work to try and get them to the point at which they could really support an ecosystem of services like we're talking about. In addition, collaborative tools that help the city and partners in the community to better understand and work with each other will be also vitally important. So having computer-aided dispatch, for example, and records management systems where you can have a level of information sharing will be pretty vital to having this ecosystem of services respond well. Downtown right now, there's, some people on some shortwave radios, and they communicate a little bit between police and neighborhood response, but we really in Minneapolis do not have a robust system that would allow, again, 911 to say, here's something that's happening, let's send out some preventive people, some responsive services, some restorative services, and have them know what's happening at a scene to the legal degree they can, and be able to coordinate response. It's just not happening in Minneapolis. And so we need to have that technology as well to be able to do that in real time. So this analytics and the service management software, CAD, RMS systems will be vital. That's also, I should mention, is also an area where I think there could be some really good efficiencies with upcoming consent decrees. I would imagine that whether it's DOJ or the state, part of their deliverables will be to the city to say, how do you measure things? Can you report on use of force? Can you report on where officers are, time spent, et cetera? That technology that will be needed for that type of reporting is also the same generally technology that can be used to help coordinate this ecosystem of services. So some efficiencies, I think there could be derived. And then fourth category is really around community engagement, not only having community members come in and be part of the overall design and process and management of this, but the implementation of services and, again, that on-the-ground work. And so those four buckets are what I've recommended for the city to start putting some budget around. I would imagine they'll be coming forward relatively soon with some numbers around that, and I'm hopeful the city council will be supportive in moving that forward. So with that, that's a broad overview of the Safe and Thriving Communities Plan, and would be happy, council members, to take questions, any dialogue you'd like around it.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I see we have questions from Vice Chair Payne.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I first want to say I'm just really grateful that you brought your expertise, your credentials, and ultimately your passion to this. I know that you've been working on this for a long time, and you've been navigating some very complex politics through that. And I just want to first start with my hope that I really hope that the thoroughness of this is going to make these ideas mainstream, because frankly, people like my colleague over here, Jeremiah Ellison, he was out at the 4th Precinct in 2015 after the killing of Jamar Clark, screaming for these things. My colleague, Robin Wansley, has been screaming for these things, and no one's believed us. And I'm grateful that you have the credentials and the expertise that you have, because it's starting to look like people are going to believe it now. And also, that's just prefacing my actual question, which is, and I also need to give this context too. I worked on the performance management and innovation team before I ran for city council. Part of the reason I ran for city council is because the level, we talk about barriers and gaps. I'm going to talk about sabotage and undermining. And we need to be realistic about what the actual challenges are in terms of implementing these ideas, because some of us have been trying to implement these ideas for years, and we've been met with undermining and sabotage. And so I'm curious, A, have you had an opportunity to speak to some of the people who have been working on this? And then B, do you have a good assessment of those barriers and how we might be able to get past them? Because I think we are now ready for a more mature conversation that's not about slogans, but real, tangible actions. And I'm just hoping that we can get beyond some of these barriers so that we can actually start making our city safe again.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councilmember Payne, and thank you for all your work, now and before on these vital issues. It's just to, as a preemptory statement on this, I share your concerns with. I've been not only from my work at Harvard University, but just around the country, researching, looking at, trying to help with these challenges, across the country, and it's progress is difficult, right? I think public safety, policing is one of those areas that is the most difficult to find alignment on between stakeholder groups to invest in. And the sets of values that people have is so wide that it's hard sometimes to find common ground, but we have to, right? And so I think the Safe and Thriving Communities Plan, my hope is that it bridges some of what you're talking about, because there's been excellent work that Minneapolis has done for years. Performance Management Innovation Office, again with the BCR, with doing analysis around 911, with looking at other forms of alternative response. The county, of course, is doing some work as well. We, in this work, talked, I don't have an exact number, but talked to more than 150 organizations or sub-organizations of the city and community, including people from OVP historically, now DNS, the Office of Innovation, Performance Management Innovation, and others across the city, city and county, to look at what they're working on and their innovations around that. So this report does leverage much of that. Go one level deeper to say, I think there's sometimes criticism for reports like this that people will say, well, we've already thought of all that, we've already been doing it. There has been good innovation happening in Minneapolis, but not enough, and most of it's been in silos and hasn't been scaled up in a way to really meet the needs of the city. And so this plan does leverage some of that, but probably builds in 80-90% more, ideas on how to actually make this work. Again, also to your question, I'm hopeful that this plan helps people to align and harmonize around that vision, around what we actually can do in Minneapolis, because we've historically, again, even with the innovations, have had fits and starts in Minneapolis, or one group will have an idea on how to move something forward, another group might not like it and fight against it, or people just don't collaborate. And so we have, again, a whole section on governance in here where that documents some of those challenges around how the city can come together more holistically and do this work. There's something for everyone in this plan. There's also something for everyone not to like, I would imagine, right? Because of that value set that many of us have that's across the spectrum. I've had questions that, for example, well, can we just replace Minneapolis Police Department with this plan instead? And my answer to that is no, you can't. We need sworn officers do critical work, but we also need other forms of services that are not currently in Minneapolis. And so how do we build those out? And so I think we can bring together people to actually move forward in this plan in a way that we haven't had yet in Minneapolis. With this common vision. We also have recommendations in the plan on how to drive forward that collaboration, particularly working across city and county boundaries and city agencies. So for example, one critical piece of work will be really good alignment across the Office of Community Safety and the Office of Public Service, and making sure that those two organizations can work together in order to develop and build out this continuum of services across the city and across community-based organizations and nonprofit. It's going to take multiple city agencies to be doing this work, but the key, the fulcrum likely will be the Office of Community Safety. Right, you're going to have the staff there really leading the charge, but it's, of course, will require the mayor and city council, but a number of city agencies to work around that. So it's that level of collaboration the city can do. We just have to get the resolve to move forward on that, and again, I think there's a common vision here and a roadmap that then people can say, let's stop analyzing and maybe even fighting about what we want to do in Minneapolis. We know what we need to do here. This catalogs a lot of that along with some new things. And so let's row together on this. I'm not going to say it's going to be easy, right? But but I think the pieces are here for that, to move that forward. I'm not sure, Councilmember Payne, if I'm answering your question, but
I'll ask it maybe a little bit more simply. On a scale of 1 to 10, what's our readiness score to actually implement this? And be honest.
Yeah, so there's, it depends. No, so it depends on the category of work. So I think from a urgency standpoint, I would say the city is at like a 9 or a 10. Everyone I've talked to, including all the organizations we did the research with, they say we really need to move forward with this type of work. From my view into the city agencies and the executives, I would say it's a really solid 8 or 9 there, because they're all now at this point saying, okay, we see what we have to do. We've heard from community for a while. Now we've done research within the city, but also with this external research, and now we have a common roadmap. We're ready to roll. It's the first time in my work with Minneapolis for a long time where I've seen city agencies say, okay, let's roll up the sleeve and get to work. Another category, though, is around budgeting and financing for this, and that it's kind of hard for me to say. That's going to somewhat depend on city council, right? I'd maybe put that at a 5 if I had to take a guess, right? I think everyone wants to move forward. Investment in this will take resources, and we all know that there's 2 consent decrees that are happening at the same time, as well as all the other initiatives that are happening in the city. And so the challenge around budgeting and financing for this is something that it's going to be a challenge. And so with that, I might put it a 5. But overall, I would say the city is ready to move forward on this. For the stakeholder groups, the city executives, again, council people I've talked to, council members I've talked to, everyone is sensing the urgency and wants to move forward. So I would say the city is poised, and that's why yesterday and today I've said I think the city of Minneapolis can lead the nation in this work. And I think very quickly, within a year or 2, could probably be the leader in the country on this. And so I would say there's a high degree of readiness.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Rainville. Oh, and first, I would just like to acknowledge that President Jenkins has joined us in this meeting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Doctor. Great report. Really appreciate the advice and the guidance and all the thoughtfulness. You had talked about working with the county. How does the county fit into what we want to do?
Yeah, so the county has a number of separate services, of course, that they offer, mostly human services. You could say as well public safety with, with the sheriff's department and whatnot. But from the human services standpoint, there are separate initiatives that the county runs with their own funding, and that sometimes duplicate what the city does, or sometimes they have a service the city doesn't provide, et cetera. And so fundamentally with this in the report, we document a number of areas in which the city and county need to collaborate in order to get not only efficiency, but to really get the best results, the best outcomes for the resources that are being expended at either the county or the city level. One of the challenges historically has been there's been a relatively low level of collaboration across the county and the city. In that type of work. Now, there have been pockets of really good collaboration, but in general, there's been a lack of collaboration for a long time, and that needs to be fixed. So not only from the funding standpoint, but from the program delivery standpoint as well. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done there.
Great. I agree with you about the lack of collaboration. Are there any plans to give this report to the county commissioners or someone from our city side give this to commissioners and ask for their help?
I'm not aware of any current plans to brief them or to have a particular meeting on this, but I'm sure that that would take place, and I can work with the city to help with that.
Great, thank you. One last question, if I may, Madam Chair. We have taken steps, as you said, with some of these new forms of public space safety, specifically violence interrupters, VCR canopy. Any ideas on how to provide accountability? It seems like it's really hard to get a handle on them compared to our public works department or even our police or fire departments. These are so new, we don't yet have a way to hold them accountable for the money we spend.
Yeah, it's, thank you, Councilmember Rainville, for that question. We do talk about that in the report. It's a challenging area because it does require a bit of how would I put it, of deftness by city management, meaning that we want to have some innovation happening in the community, even experimentation, I would go as far as to say, to figure out what works from a community-based standpoint. What services, people in here that have services that we've been talking to, what's working in the community at the ground level to really have outcomes that help people, families and communities, individuals feel safe and thrive. But we also, over time, we're going to have to know what's working and what isn't working. As we mentioned, with this ecosystem of services and having them collaborate and work together, we have to, in Minneapolis, over time, be able to measure not only outputs, of like how many services have been delivered and how many people an organization has touched and helped, but also what the outcomes from those programs and services are over the mid to long term. And Minneapolis, at this point, really has not done much evaluation work on that, nor does the city have the infrastructure or the human capital to do that level of evaluation. Another component of that is that the actual service providers oftentimes are, they're kind of like startups, right? They might be 1 or 2 people, or maybe they have 20 people. They're starting to do some type of novel work. Oftentimes they don't have the capacity to have someone to actually track every day, here's exactly what we've done and the outputs, and then let's track this person to see what the outcome is in 6 months later. And so helping the community-based providers with that type of data collection as well is going to be an important piece to this, to be able to then flow that back and to understand what works, what doesn't, how do we measure it, how do we have accountability around resources, and more effectively allocate resources going forward as well. Rewarding those services community-based that are delivering really solid results, and for the ones that need some help, helping them to figure out how to improve or scale up or change the service in order to meet those objectives. So that is a part right now that's in this report that the city does not have a lot of capabilities on that needs to really ramp up.
And do you believe maybe technology can help with this accountability to keep track?
I do, over the mid and long term. Some of this, Councilman Rainville, is simply paper-based that we don't even have in Minneapolis, right? It's Microsoft Excel, and knowing where a community-based organization, again, like how many people have they worked with that week or that month? What was the result of that? That could be sent back to the city and be aggregated to be able to have at least some sense of what's working and what isn't working. But over time, as services are more integrated, and if 911, for example, the example I had, can send out a mixed set of services to be able to know, okay, where are people, who are they responding to, what happened with that incident, and then be able to track what happens long-term through records management and other types of systems, that can, over time, provide much more rigorous evidence-based insight on service delivery. That's going to take a few years, though, to get to that point, but the basic analytics can start now.
Great. Thank you very much, and thank you for being a Third Ward resident.
Thank you, Councilmember Rainville. Councilmember Wansley.
Thank you, Chair Vital. First, thank you for this report. We've kind of already emphasized that many residents have organized around these same ideas for decades and have asked the city to invest in a public safety system that does not just center on police, but actually supports a public health approach and a holistic approach towards our residents, which is actually a real form of public safety. And often, and for far too long, they've been dismissed, belittled by policymakers and executive leadership here. And it's exactly why we're under MDHR legal settlement and why we're also about to be under a DOJ consent decree. But that said, I also want to thank you, Councilmember Payne, for emphasizing that there's been a number of us, a select few of us, who've also echoed these same ideas. I'm thinking of last February, in fact, right after Mayor Locke was shot and killed by MPD. Both CM Payne and I brought forward a proposal to use a phased-in approach to create a department for a comprehensive and integrated public safety system. That proposal was also in line with, again, working class communities saying we need to do exactly all the things that's in this report. But it was voted down by a majority of my colleagues after the mayor actually emailed everyone saying oppose it because it was duplicative. And in light of that, you know, and that was 18 months ago, I actually want to read a quote from your report on page 14 that says we were not only on the right path, but we could have actually began this work 18 months ago rather than having a discussion, starting discussion today. And on that, your words or your team words, it says this plan provides guidance to help the city establish a clear plan for developing a service ecosystem to support the health and well-being outcomes of its city's residents. Implementing this vision will take time, resources, and sustained effort. Recognizing, and you voted this, the need for sustained effort over time to realize this vision, this plan presents a phased approach to implementation, breaking recommendations into near-term, mid-term, and long-term horizons. So that said, this report hammers on the fact too, and you named this, I believe, on page 22, that city leadership has not taken actually this comprehensive model very seriously. And we continue to lack that vision in advancing essentially a new mandate on public safety. And actually, you frame it on page 22, a lack of enterprise-wide direction. And it says that there has been a lack of vision internally regarding how the city will address violence prevention. For example, while the Department of Neighborhood Safety is clear about its mandate and has developed a public health approach to its work, this has not been fully embraced by city leadership, nor has its integration with other departments / efforts have been made a priority. That's on page 22. And then yesterday, we saw the mayor host a press conference around this and said that he was committed, his office is committed to executing this plan. And I want to name, we also heard the very same thing early 2022. And we heard that there would be implementation teams that would create a plan for this public safety system, this new mandate, specifically through OCS. And right now, it's kind of hard for residents to believe or take us serious about this work because they've heard this promise so often and have not seen anything come into fruition. And as I named earlier around the green zones piece, it's because we're constantly seeing the disconnect. I want to highlight some positive dynamic or proposal that even our commissioner brought forward, at least in the press, is saying that we should replace our 5 precincts with full service community centers that's going to be equipped with social services to fight addiction, homelessness, and other root causes of problems that manifest on the streets. But I also want to note conversations I've had with you, Commissioner, we've also know the mayor has instructed us or instructed our department to not move forward with new programs. Major disconnect. Similar, we're seeing the city proudly celebrating our BCR team, yet that BCR team still struggles to have enough vans to meet the needs on the streets, and was recently quoted as feeling like they are not being taken seriously in this city or even provided with the resources that they need to keep up with the demand. And this is a program that's actually listed as, and I want to credit Gina Allen and Brian Smith, our folks in PMI who have been leading the charge in this place of City Hall on these efforts. and have gotten us to this point. This is actually one of the programs that's listed in our legal settlement that says you should have been doing this all along. You should have been listening to your staff, and you have not. Another mismatch between words and actions. We talk a lot about expanding unarmed public safety workers and neighborhood safety, that department. And this is great considering that workforce is actually predominantly Black and brown residents who live in the areas where they're being subcontracted, but they don't have city wage scales, benefits, or unions. So to kind of point to Councilmember Rainville's part, if we want more accountability or oversight over our subcontractors, which you can consider subcontractors, we should be looking at how do we professionalize those services so that people can actually be provided with the wages that they need to do when they're out in between bullets, and also standing and offering a presence in our communities rather than showing up with a gun and badge. And knowing that there is not parity between both that unarmed workforce and our current police department. And we do need to, at least on this body, reconcile that. But so far, there's been a mismatch between actions and words. And I also want to name a couple clarification points in this report. You offered this in your comments in terms of BCR or being a model of a responsive or co-responsive model. It's on page 60. And I do want to offer clarity. BCR is not a co-responder model, and it was intentionally designed to not be one based off of data that has shown, especially at the county level, that there should be a separation between law enforcement and our other public safety workforce as it relates to this. So I did want to offer that clarification. Another point of clarification on page 23, where you talk about the challenges that comes from our current government structure. It says here that under the structure, the mayor and city council essentially shared operational oversight of the city enterprise. And that basically, here's a quote: interviewees have noted that this led to confusion among city staff, partners in the community regarding who is really in charge. I want to offer clarity right now. Per our charter, which our charter trumps ordinance, even our government structure ordinance, the mayor has remained the sole authority over our police department, MPD. Council has never had any authority over the police. This is why this body has led on the comprehensive solutions like BCR, violence interrupters, the things that gives us more options. But I want to also emphasize that reality still exists today. The police falls fully under the jurisdiction of the mayor's office, the executive office. And that is, again, per our charter. Our charter, regardless of what our ordinance says, the government structure, it's not Commissioner Alexander, it's the mayor. So in recognizing that, we still have a duty on this body to move forward with the comprehensive initiatives that's listed in this report, and to actually create funding mechanisms to be successful in that work, and to not continue to defer to the mayor on this work that has shown, or he has shown, to not be that urgency level at about 2, based off of DOJ and the MDHR legal settlement. So I just want to say thank you. It's sad that it took Harvard. I'm glad for your degree. I got degrees too. But it's sad that it took the Credential Harvard's report for us to be like, well, maybe tens of years, decades of years, Black people were right. Brown people were right about what we need for our public safety system. So hopefully Harvard credentials finally gives this body the political will to actually show up and execute and not create another work group, because people are tired of being asked to show up for work groups and then don't see those recommendations go anywhere. So I get that's part of your recommendations too. People are ready for action. They don't want to have to sign up for another work group. People are work group tired. Put a ban on work groups, a moratorium here. So I'm really excited to finally get to the action part, because many of us have been ready for that, and I hope the rest of our colleagues are, and staff, because we're moving regardless. So thank you.
Councilmember Ellison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll keep my comments short. I think a lot of my colleagues covered a lot of my sentiments. If I were like a true cynic, I probably would never run for office. So I think things are possible, right? And so I don't mean to sound like a cynic with what I'm going to say, but if the urgency level is a 9 and the willingness is a 9, but the financial readiness is a 5, then the real answer to Councilmember Payne's question is 5. right? Our readiness is 5. And that's not a reflection of the work that you've done here. I think this report is incredible, and I want to thank you for that. But I do just want to note that that's sort of how this work goes about. And, you know, discussions around, changes to how we approach behavioral crisis, you know, didn't start after the murder of George Floyd. They started in 2018. The creation of the Office of Violence Prevention didn't start after the murder of George Floyd. That work started in 2018. And so, these things are, so it's not like these are new concepts that folks weren't aware of, that folks weren't moving on prior to that. And so, I think last budget, the council obviously plays a huge role in the final approval of the budget. But, I do think that on any given year, out of $1.5 billion, you're seeing the council amend 3 million of that, right? Maybe 5 million of that, right? And so there really does need to be buy-in at the executive level, knowing just how much, what council actually does around the budget is make small amendments, quite frankly. And maybe we have the authority to, amend $500 million, but, I've never seen this council do that, right? I've never seen, and there's been, I've served under different councils as well. And so, I'm grateful to have the information, but yeah, I think that there needs to be a lot of work. And I guess if I had to have a question is, what moves that financial readiness from a 5 to a 9, right? What actually gets us there? Maybe that's kind of re-asking Councilmember Payne's question, but I think that's the question that I'm really interested in. Again, yes, BCR. When you talk anecdotally to folks out in the community and even police officers, it's a program that people really believe in. It's a program that even our officers, when they're confronted with a situation, they're now learning to how to identify. This isn't really my role. I'm going to call somebody who actually has the expertise to intervene here. That's a huge asset, and yet we've got our team, unsure of whether their contract's going to be renewed, right? That's a pain point. That's misalignment, as Councilmember Wansley, used the term. And so, what gets us from a 5 to a 9, a 5 to a 10, when it comes to that financial readiness, which I would count as our way of actually deploying a plan out into the community.
All right, Councilmember Ellison, it's a great question. There are two near-term pieces I think that I can't speak for the city executives, of course. I'm not a city executive, but there are two pieces that I think could be accomplished within the coming weeks. One is we had document those 4 categories broadly of investment that would be needed, and those, there's sub-points to all those, of course, and that'll be expanded. That proposed budget will. I would advocate that the city executive should bring that to City Council as soon as possible. This is, again, budget season, and so that will, to a large degree, quote unquote, be the proof in the pudding. Whether or not the city really wants to move forward with this as city executives, is do they actually say, here's what we want to move forward on, and here's the budget to actually put the people and the resources and the technology and the services in place. That will show that level of readiness. Again, then it'll be in your camp, again, to some degree, to say, yes, we can move forward on this. And then there's, that 5-part action plan. Councilmember Wansley, very empathetic, yes, we can't have a lot of just committees, taking this plan and saying, let's study this plan for 2 years. But we do need community engagement and people that are on work groups to actually move this forward with city people. And so with that budget approval, and then with this turnkey of this 5 steps that we've advocated in the plan that need to happen in 2023, that will get us on the path, right, to really moving. And that will also show community members that we're serious here on this. And we, again, as we mentioned, a lot of the ideas have been around since the 1960s, right, and a lot of the community-based work. But there's also ideas in here that are relatively new. We have not yet in this nation had a city that can develop, for example, the technological infrastructure to knit services together in ways that are documented in this, right? So we have new technologies and new tools that can also really help with this. So investing in all that and getting that moving forward will show that we're serious about this and that the city of Minneapolis can actually do it.
Thank you. And I just had one more follow-up, and thank you for that response. I think that often when it comes to these new programs, and as we've heard on the dais already, there is sort of this impetus to sort of jump, and I think it's sort of under the guise of good governance on this idea of, oversight and accountability, and how do we know that what they're doing with the money that we're giving them, even though the money is, by all comparisons, incredibly small. How long does a new innovative program need to exist before you think it is really responsible and reasonable for us to start having that conversation? I mean, obviously you want to be monitoring from the very beginning, but how long does a program need to work through, sort of trial and error of a new thing? How long does it need to go through that sort of development and maturing process before it's really responsible for us to start questioning it, its value at an existential level, right? Because we go through many police budget cycles without questioning the existential value of police, but we go through maybe less than 5 years worth of OVP, and folks get a little bit antsy. They want to start questioning the existential value of violence interruption, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, understood. I guess I would answer that is there needs to be in Minneapolis, which the current city doesn't really currently have, a set of metrics or governance around that can partly answer your question. So, at the very basic level, we need to understand for community-based providers that they have an organizational structure, right? So metrics around that. We know what services they're going to provide. We know how many people they have. We know the budget they need for it, right? From there, it only takes a matter of weeks or months to really start tracking outputs, not outcomes, not valuing how good that organization is, but essentially saying, do they actually have people out on the street? Do they actually have people delivering Narcan? Do they have people that are helping someone who's unhoused, right? And how many people have they touched, worked with in a period of time? That can be measured right now, it should be, and start to be tracked. Not from accountability, meaning like we're going to make sure you're doing everything you say you're doing, but from a sense of like, are we learning what's happening in the community and deploying resources in those ways we think are going to work? From those outputs, then after a year or two, you can start to measure some of the outcomes, mostly by recidivism trends. By most of these organizations, they know who their high flyer people are that they work with. I mean, the people who are continuously helping. They can track over a period, 12, 18, 24 months, how that person has responded to those services, and they keep cycling back in and out. There's learning that takes place there. And then really, though, it does take a while, longitudinally, to really say what type of long-term outcomes and impact are we having from services. But so that array, I think, needs to be set up and designed in Minneapolis to better understand. Then at the very least, for certain city council members who may want to, harp on where is that, $80,000 gone that we gave to a certain community-based organization. At least there's some basic metrics where you can say, council member, here's what they've done with that. And then over time, be able to measure it. So again, it does go back to this. We have to have some experimentation and some ingenuity and some innovation at the community-based level to design services that only the community knows what really is going to work. It's not, the mayor's offices doesn't know, for the most part. They have to work to co-create with community. And so we need a little bit of that flexibility, but also layering in over time some structures so that we can ramp up things that work well.
Thank you.
Councilmember Payne.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Some of this discussion made me think of something, and this might be a little bit in the weeds, so bear with me here. But, back when we first started this work, we started by evaluating the problem nature codes, and the specific problem nature code we were looking at was emotionally disturbed person, and that could be anyone suffering a mental health disorder to, negative effect of substance use. The outcome of that was to create 2 new PNCs, one for a crisis response, but one for a wellness check. And what I'm trying to think through is, I don't want us to stop at BCR, and that's exactly what your report outlines. And at the same time, from an implementation perspective, we did a direct contract with Canopy Roots, and their scope is right now specific to those two problem nature codes. And so that's a little bit detailed in the weeds, but my actual question is, as we think about expanding, and I'm really interested in peer support specialists, so that could be, somebody who has experience with substance use disorder, has experience with living unsheltered, and having them be employees of the city of Minneapolis and being able to be a part of the community. Have you put thought into how we expand those services and how we think about contract? And Councilmember Wanzi asked this, but I'm kind of getting into the, we need to define the PNC codes that are eligible for an alternative response, and then we have to develop those services. And we need to either contract those or hire those. And have you I've started reading through it, but it is 150 pages, so I'm working my way through. Did you get into specifics around recommendations as it relates to contract versus hire? What types of categories of PNCs may need to be created or not? How we might interact with our community organizations, making sure that marginalized people can be a part of those committees, let alone can we have those marginalized individuals be a part of our safety ecosystem?
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Payne, for that question. Yes, we do get into that in the report. We intentionally, one of the challenges, I guess, in developing the report is how prescriptive we wanted to be versus how, overarching guidance. And I think we found the right balance with it, because we do know that the city will need to take this and maybe click one level deeper in some of these areas. So we provided some advice and some frameworks for how to think about analyzing, problem nature codes, what that can mean for those 4 different subcomponents to responsive services, and how that can be analyzed over time, as well as whether or not those services could be community-based or city employees or as county collaboration as well. So there is some idea sets in there. I would add, though, that there is going to have to be more work done on that to continue that analysis. And PMI was started to do that, and I think the city should do more of that analysis, but not get too bogged down in the analysis, right? Because we can spend 5 years analyzing problem nature codes to debate, who should respond to what, and we're going to be here 5 years from now having the same conversation. So one of the quick things that we do recommend the city should do is a gap analysis around that preventive and responsive and restorative, to be able to quickly say, here are some areas where we just don't have any services right now. And ideally go out to the community to say, with an RFP type process, to say, are there services you see in communities that could fit into this service continuum that we don't currently have? And let's get those started, and over time, evaluate them and ramp them up. And again, one thing I would add to be more in the weeds is, there are a number of challenges in the communities that we all know about, many that we've heard about today, that don't fall under problem nature codes because they don't come into the system that way, right? People see them in the community, they know where the challenges are, they handle it in the community, and that's a good thing, but it also means we have to work with the community to say, let's resource you to actually deliver this service in an equitable way, in a way that's robust, that we can do more over time. And so that, I guess what I'm saying is, thinking through that continuum of services and moving quickly on identifying where the gaps are is going to be vitally important. Part of that is analyzing problem nature codes, but let's not get hung up on that piece.
Thank you.
Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I just have some comments, and it's obvious that the more we can put into the prevention part of the services, the less we will have responsive and restorative services. And I've been thinking about what can we as a city do to fill that gap to get to problems before we need violence interrupters and before we need peacemakers and that sort of thing. And this is also what I was hearing Hennepin County judges say last night during the listening session. They were a panel of juvenile judges, judges that deal with juvenile things. sorry. Some of the most experienced judges in Hennepin County. But this is also what they said they need and that they experience in terms of filling the needs of intervention for young people that are in trouble. So it doesn't and it shouldn't matter what is city and what is county to places like Harvard. But it's really important in how we implement this framework and knit it together. That's what I see as most valuable in this report. I need to say that I don't see that this has ever been about political will. In fact, one of the main reasons for embarking on this work with you has been to depoliticize the really important work that this is. I didn't see, and caveat, I have not gotten all the way through the report, but I haven't yet seen any new bricks that we need to establish at this point in terms of what you were saying, the gap analysis. But there are places where we are light, like mediation services, for example, and we could work to build that out. But this is, what I've read so far is this is how we've been struggling to coordinate them all together, because it's not all within our sphere of influence. More problem nature codes are not going to solve these problems if we aren't well coordinated. So I've seen some of the things mentioned here as like bricks right now that we have in a yard, but we could do a lot better job of building something with them to work better for the community. I hope that none of us here are here to divide people with this report, but to bring us all together around a plan. And it's clear to me that it is much, much bigger than our city. We're not gonna solve this with our own city things or in fighting with the mayor's office. It is really important, though, that we be seen together as the main catalyst of it. And I think this will help us move all of these pieces. Something that you say in this report reminds me of the work of the Public Safety Work Group. I think you maybe interviewed some of the people in the Public Safety Work Group. I think we need to put those into action better and more effectively than we've been able to accomplish to date. And I have to say, I think the Office of Community Safety, being coordinated, putting all of the main public safety functions of our city under one commissioner is absolutely critical as to how we move forward with this blueprint. So I really appreciate how Commissioner Alexander has been involved in this, because I really see his department as the ones to help us continue to be that catalyst, both within all the city things that we can provide, but also with our philanthropic partners as they want to continue in this work, with the county as we seek to be better coordinated. And Commissioner Alexander heard those judges at the listening session last night also express those similar frustrations. So there isn't a specific question in here for you, Dr. Oftali, but I do appreciate this work, and I think it's helped to give us a depoliticized framework to move forward, and I hope that we do.
Thank you, Councilmember Palmisano. Just, if I may, just briefly reply to that. I agree with all of your points. In many ways, these upstream services, these preventive services, can be looked at from this lens of the social determinants of health, right? And there are so many factors that go into what it means to live safe and thrive in a community. And you can take those social determinants of health and map those into programs that are community-based that can do that work, right? And it doesn't have to be, I'm agnostic, of course, as we are, whether it's county or city or community-based. This is what we call a continuum. It's an ecosystem. The key thing is that all these services need to work together and be harmonized and have synergy. I don't like that term, but I'll use it, right, together. And so it's that piece is going to require a lot of coordination and collaboration and guidance. I agree that having the hub organization of the Office of Community Safety is really a good structure, in that you have to have this kind of the hub organization, but with this idea that you work across agencies, across boundaries, across sectors to really magnify this work and to integrate it and make it more holistic. And that will be, I think, the big charge of OCS to move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Oftilli, for this presentation and answering our questions. It's been a pleasure for my office to work with you. I know that it's come up a couple times that you came here from Harvard with your report, but you actually came from South Minneapolis with your report. You're a kid from the South Side, and so
Lake and
working
28th.
Exactly. Working with you this year, you know, I've learned not only the academic side of it, but your passion for Minneapolis. You really love this city. You want us to be the best. You reached out to the city of Minneapolis and said, how can I help? I want to help. I want to use my resources to make Minneapolis the best city it can be after so many failures around public safety. So I really appreciate that. I really appreciate some of the things in the report I really like because I've struggled with them. I like that you've said we can adjust our violence prevention methods, especially involving interrupters. I love the interrupter model, but I think we've looked at it like they all have to be one way, and it's not that way. Our neighborhoods are different, block by block. So I like that there's an opportunity, you know, in this roadmap that you've given us to adjust that, and it's okay. You know, we can have an interrupter that does one thing in Ward 4 that's very different than Ward 5, right? And so that's exciting to me. I kind of have a hard question that may put you on the spot a little bit, but it's something that I've been hearing about, and I don't know if you've even had a chance to meet with everyone, but I'm wondering if you think that our current police leadership is up to the task. Are they ready to do this, to get this new vision executed?
First, thank you, Chair Vita, for the remarks and the questions. I'm probably, I would just say first, you know, probably not in the best situated position or qualified to evaluate whether the leadership is, you know, the best. What I can say from an outside perspective and somewhat observing the city is that the Safe and Thriving Communities Plan, as you know, is much more broad than policing, right? And policing is about 1/16 of this overall service array. And so the focus of this broadly is around how to develop this ecosystem. When it comes to police reform, which the consent decrees in large part will tackle, as well as just the ingenuity and innovation that will happen from the chief of police and the commissioner, with Chief O'Hara, he comes from a city where they had a consent decree and that they moved through that successfully. I think he understands what it means to lead during a consent decree and to build, importantly, culture change within that time frame as well, which is, in my experience across the country, is one of the hardest things to do. But also has a temperament for it. So this is going to take some time, right? And over time, I think we'll be able to tell. But I think the capabilities right now Minneapolis has from the human capital perspective, and Dr. Alexander has done an amazing job at setting up OCS. I mean, we do have to remember that a couple of years ago, we didn't have this infrastructure. We did not have this organization, right? And so the mayor was able to, under his leadership and city council support, bring in Dr. Alexander to set up all this infrastructure to be ready to deploy this future, right? And so I think we're at that point, and some of this is to Councilmember Payne and Ellison's questions around readiness, right? We now have the infrastructure, we have the people here, right? We have the urgency, we have what I hope is a plan that can harmonize all the other ideas that everyone's had and put them into one roadmap. And we have a mayor that says that we want to move forward on this. And so I think the right people are, you know, in place, broadly speaking. And as you move forward to implementation, you need to add some people and, you know, change some of the capabilities going forward and what people work on. But broadly, I think it's there.
Thank you. And thank you for your hard work on this. I'm very positive about it. I'm excited. Like as you said, it's a roadmap. I think community is excited and they want to get involved in any way that they can. I will say though, more work groups, it's too much. Work groups aren't my thing. And neither is the community. But if we're going to, you know, take this gem that you've given us, work groups might be a part of it. And so I appreciate the work you've done. Looking forward to working with you and my colleagues on the council. Thank you.
Thank you, council members.
I think Councilmember Ellison wants to vote on the consent agenda?
Yes.
If there's no objections, clerks, will you please document? Thank you. Seeing no further business before us, and I will direct the clerk to receive and file this report, and I declare this meeting adjourned.
Mom I'm in love with. She's the best mom ever. She has 6 babies. These guys are fat and healthy. His eye, his right eye. I know, you're the loud one. I was worried about his right eye and it looks amazing right now. A lot of people don't realize that we do so much animal care. These guys are feral litter